The first thing you notice about my uncle's place isn't the silence. It's the light. Or the lack of it. He lived lives out past where the county paves the roads, in a hollow so deep the sun seems to give up an hour early. The house is a slump thing of weathered gray wood, crouching under a canopy of ancient oaks that have grown twisted, reaching away from the clearing as if trying to escape. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, not since I was a kid. The call from his neighbor, Marnie, came as a shock. "Ethan's took poorly," she'd said, her voice crackling down the line like a dry leaf underfoot. "He's asking for kin. Says the things in the walls are talking to him again." She made it sound like a recurring flu, not dementia or psychosis. I was the only kin left who could come. The drive was a form of sensory deprivation. The lush green of the state park gradually bled into a monotonous corridor of pine and scrub, the sky shrinking to a narrow ribbon of washed-out blue above the dirt road. When I finally pulled up to the property, the absence of sound was a physical pressure. No birds, no insects. Just the low, mournful groan of the wind working its way through the pines. Marnie was waiting on the porch, a woman carved from gristle and worry. She didn't smile. Her eyes, the color of old river stones, scanned me up and down before flicking nervously towards the tree line. "He's inside," she said, her voice low. "Ain't been himself. You'll see." She handed me a key, cold and heavy in my palm. "There's rules here, boy. Best you learn 'em quick." "Rules?" I asked, shouldering my duffel bag. She pointed a knobby finger at me. "The main one. The important one. Come nightfall, you keep them curtains drawn. Tight. No matter what you hear. No matter what you think you see in the cracks. And you look at me now, you don't look at the moon. Not here." I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so backwoods superstitious. "Okay," I said, humoring her. "No looking at the moon. Got it." Her face tightened. "You think I'm telling tales? That's fine. Your uncle thought so too, his first time. Learn different." She turned to go, pausing at the edge of the porch. "We all learn different." The inside of the house smelled of dust, menthol balm, and something else underneath, a sweet, coppery tang, like old meat left out in the damp. Uncle Ethan was a shriveled form in a large bed in the front room, his breathing a wet, ragged sound. His eyes were open, but they didn't track me. They were fixed on the ceiling, wide with a terror so absolute it seemed to have hollowed him out. I tried to talk to him, to tell him who I was. His head lolled towards me, and a thread of saliva dripped onto his pillow. His lips, chapped and cracked, moved silently for a moment before he managed a whisper. "It's almost time," he rasped. "It's so hungry. Can you hear it?" Scratching. I heard nothing. Just the groan of the old house settling and the whisper of the wind outside. I settled into a worn armchair, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. This wasn't a weekend visit. This was a vigil. The first night was the longest of my life. As true darkness fell, a profound stillness descended on the hollow. The wind died completely. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was thick, expectant. A chorus of faint, sibilant voices just on the edge of hearing. I couldn't make out words, only a sense of immense, patient longing. A cold dread, primal and absolute, seeped into my bones. I understood then, in a way that bypassed all logic, that Marnie wasn't guarding me from superstition. She was giving me the only survival instructions that mattered. I didn't sleep. I sat rigid in that chair, my knuckles white on the armrests, praying for dawn. The days were a bleary-eyed blur of caring for my uncle, trying to get broth into him, cleaning him up. The fear of the night bled into the daylight, casting long shadows over everything. I started noticing things. The way the local folks in the nearby shanty town, a handful of houses clinging to the main road, would never look up at the sky. They walked with their heads slightly bowed, their movements hurried if they were out near dusk. Their eyes, like Marnie's, held that same flat, weary fear. On the third night, the curiosity began to gnaw at me. What was out there? What could possibly be so bad? The human mind is a self-destructive thing. It needs to know. The whispered rule, "We don't look at the moon here," became a constant itch in my brain. The sounds were worse that night. The scraping was more insistent, now accompanied by a low, vibrational hum that made my teeth ache. The whispers were clearer, though no more intelligible. They were full of want, an infinite yawning hunger. And then, a sliver of silver light. I'd drawn the curtains tight, but one had caught on a splinter in the windowsill, leaving a gap no wider than a pencil. A beam of moonlight, cold and pure, cut through the stifling dark of the room and fell directly on my uncle's face. His eyes, which had been closed, snapped open. They were no longer clouded with age or sickness. They were wide, terrified, and utterly aware. He stared at the sliver of light, and a choked sound escaped his throat. His head turned slowly, mechanically towards me. His mouth opened. But it wasn't his voice that came out. It was a composite, a horrific symphony of all the whispers from outside, funneled through his dying vocal cords. It was the sound of dry leaves skittering on stone, of meat being torn from bone, of deep, subterranean water flowing through dark places. "Look!" it commanded. Every cell in my body screamed to obey. It wasn't a request. It was a gravitational pull. My head began to turn towards the window. I fought it, my muscles trembling with the strain. I squeezed my eyes shut. "Look at us." I could feel it. Just beyond the glass. A presence of such immense, ancient mass that it defied shape. It was in the light. It was the light. The moon wasn't a thing in the sky. It was an eye. And it was looking in. And it was hungry. With a sob of sheer effort, I wrenched my body from the chair and stumbled across the room. I fumbled for the curtain, my fingers numb and clumsy. The voice from my uncle's bed rose to a screeching, multi-layered keen of frustration. My hand closed on the fabric. I yanked it shut, plunging the room back into absolute darkness. The sound stopped. The silence returned. I slid down the wall, gasping, my entire body shaking. I didn't move until the first gray light of dawn filtered through the curtains. Uncle Ethan was dead. His head was turned toward the window, his eyes wide open, frozen in an expression of terminal awe. But that wasn't the worst of it. His mouth was still open. And inside, it wasn't a tongue. It was a cluster of thin, pale, root-like filaments, dry and withered, clutching at nothing. I ran. I left him there. I didn't pack my things. I just ran to my car and sped down that dirt road as if all the devils in hell were at my bumper. I ended up at the dusty general store on the main road, babbling to the old man behind the counter. I told him everything. The sounds. The voice. My uncle. He listened, his face a grim mask. He didn't seem surprised. When I finished, he just nodded slowly. Ethan always was a curious one. Paid the price for it. He wiped the counter with a rag. That thing out there. It ain't the moon. The moon's just a rock in the sky. This is something else. Something that got stuck here, long time ago. It hangs there in the same spot, behind the light, and it's lonely. So lonely. It wants to be seen. It wants to be known. And when you look at it, you let it in. It plants a piece of itself in you. It grows in the dark behind your eyes. He looked at me, and for the first time, his eyes met mine. They were full of a pity that chilled me to my soul. You didn't look, boy. You fought it. That's good. He paused, his next words landing like a shovel of dirt on a coffin. But it saw you fight. It knows you resisted. It don't get that often. It likes that. I got out of that town. I drove until the gas light came on, and then I kept driving. I'm in a motel room now, 100 miles away. The curtains are drawn. It's a clear night. I can feel it though. A faint, persistent pull at the base of my skull. A whisper in the hum of the motel's air conditioner. It's a clear night. The moon is full. And I have this unbearable, terrifying urge to go outside and look up.